Hi there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, worldwide TV network, womanontv.tv, and IT247 out of Franklin, Tennessee. And today we have all the way from New York, who are you and what film are you representing that I really did truly love?
Hi, I'm Laura Naylor, and I directed VAS-Y COUPE, which with the English title Wine Crush.
Let's talk about this film because I keep telling my friends who make wine that this is important because China is entering the world of wine now. And, I think they're going to end up overtaking a lot of European wine, unfortunately, but it'll be very interesting. But, you made this film on the process of how things are being made, and that's very interesting. We don't get a chance to see a lot of that, and I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I really was able to offer a behind the scenes look into an old way of making wine that may sadly be disappearing. It's a grower maker of champagne, very famous, Jacques Solos. But the film actually shows the workers behind the wine that come for harvest every year. And the wine family hosts them, houses them, feeds them. And it's this wonderful community that's formed. And these workers have been coming back for 30 years. But this type of situation is rapidly disappearing. And I was able to create a time capsule of this basically through a fully immersive documentary.
Now, I love this because you really, like you just said, you really don't get a chance to see that. And it is very important because it's always what goes into that. It's about the soil, it's about the grapes, and it's very important. And a lot of times it's about those workers. And then what happens, as we know, it can be gone down from generation to generation to families. But what happens when you can't replace them? You have a segment in there when they are getting older, they start slowing down when it comes to picking. And I was thinking they have back problems from always,
Well, I went as research and picked the grapes myself, and I definitely had back problems after that. It is grueling labor. So that they've been doing that for 30 years is impressive, but very hard on their bodies.
Tell the audiences what's the seasons that they stop and when do they end? Because I found it fascinating since when they had like their last dinner. It's almost kind of emotional too.
Yeah, we were able to capture, the real community that's formed and those bonds over so many years between two very disparate worlds in France. These working class people that come from the north to this very prosperous region of Champagne, and that community that's formed is, it's hard to find something like that elsewhere because classes in France don't combine in that way. But harvest is every year during fall. It's, the dates are dependent upon weather and the moon. And so that year it was late August into September. Some years it's October, but it's always fall. So harvest itself is always, a 10, 15-day period in fall. And then throughout the rest of the year, they're growing.
What was most important as far as capturing this to make that compelling story? And what made you want to take on doing this documentary? Documentaries aren't easy. And I'm thinking now, okay, when did she start this? She must have finished it just in time.
Yeah, so this is my third feature documentary, and every documentary I've made is, really actually about people, though the stories themselves are very different. The first film I made is Duck Beach, which is about Mormon singles trying to get married at a spring break event. The second is The Fix, about recovery from heroin addiction in the Bronx. And now this film about workers who pick grapes for champagne maker. You'd think they're all quite different, and they are in terms of subject matter. But actually, they're about these little microcosms of community that I find fascinating and that I want to allow for these people to tell their own story. And so in this case, I was able to make a verite film, which is purely observational. So the experience of watching the film is as if you're there with the workers doing harvest yourself.
Who did you find more fascinating? Was it the workers or was it the family?
They're both fascinating is the truth. And I was so lucky to have just wonderful access to both of the communities. I went back to the workers' hometowns with them and filmed in their homes, filmed their families. And I was allowed complete access at the vineyard during the duration of the harvest. And I think, while individually those worlds are both fascinating, it's the combination that I was so compelled to document.
I could see this being sort of like a Michael Apter, where you could actually go back like 5 years later and see who's still around. Did that ever procrastination?
I would love to go back because, you know, this film sort of ends right on the precipice of a big transition. Anselm is retiring, his son is taking over. A lot of the workers are aging. And so what will harvest look like in 5 years? We don't know. And it would be, you know, quite interesting to document that.
What did you, how was it, how hard was it to get permission to go and do that? And when did you start out from start to beginning? Because I always tell people it takes an average of 7 years to do a documentary. And people don't realize that sometimes you start, sometimes you finish. You've done 3, you understand. I remember when I first started talking to Ken Burns when, you know, he started doing the Civil War. And, you know, Ken is working on 5 projects with his daughter now at the same time. And I'm like, Ken, how do you keep doing all of this? Because it's not.
I mean, some documentaries take, you know, are shot over an extended period of years, and all documentaries are grueling to make. But I was lucky enough that I had structured the film for the duration of the harvest. So while the shoot itself was only a couple months long, and as opposed to years and years that some people do, the idea formed years ago when I was living in France, and I met a sommelier who had done harvest at Jacques Solos. And so I went and did harvest myself. And it was during picking grapes and meeting these workers and meeting the wine family that I had the idea for the film. So then I raised money and I came back the next year with a crew. And, you know, so it's always a multi-year process to get from idea to people actually watching your film.
Did they find it intrusive at all sometimes? Because you captured a lot of things there. I can only imagine what you left there.
I think the hardest part was gaining trust. And luckily I had been there working myself. So I had relationships. And my French producer is also a friend of Guillaume Solos, the son who's taking over that particular vineyard. And so it's through those personal relationships that you're able to get trust. And once you have that, then you are allowed access. So when I came to shoot, the trust was already formed, and it took only a couple days for them to forget the cameras were there. Like we had, you know, we were just constantly part of the scenery of that harvest. And over time, no one cared that the camera was even in the room. And I think that's why we were able to achieve true verite, because otherwise you have to supplement with, you know, interviews or text, or, you know, people might be looking at the camera because they're nervous that it's there, or, you know, but I think I was so impressed with the ability of all the subjects of the film to be very natural and open on camera.
How tough of it, and I always thought about this because I have a Segway and I ride it daily, whether I'm going to get groceries or whatever the case may be. Sometimes after a while you hit those bumps and you can feel it on your joints, where like the lower back. What is it like when you're picking, whether it's cotton or picking grapes? After a while, you're going to develop those back problems. How did they deal with that? I always wanted to know about that.
I mean, I think it's something that your body can habituate to. So my experience, you know, I haven't done a lot of manual labor. So I went to the harvest and began picking grapes, trying my hardest to pick at the rate that those laborers pick. And it was a shock to my body. But they've been picking, and many of them doing other forms of manual labor throughout the year. And there is a way that your body grows accustomed to the work. So they certainly were laughing at me for how much pain I was in. But I'm sure there are long-term effects for their health as well, for, you know, whatever compensations have to be made within their bodies to bend over for hours and hours a day. And the grapes are low on the vine. So it's not like apple picking. It's like you are either bending your back over or you're squatting. And I tried the squatting method, and doing thousands of squats a day is also grueling.
Well, that makes it interesting because I always tell them it's about the soil. You have to worry about weather conditions. I tell people, whether you believe in climate change or not, it's real. You can see what's happening with growing things in general. And I've been telling people for years now, you know, you've got to take this stuff seriously because and California's got 2 fire seasons. It started 3 years ago. You know, we're setting up our artist retreat, and it's about the soil. So the property that we chose has never had a fire on it, but the soil is so It's not never been contaminated. It's never had any fracking or anything like that. So when it comes to growing grapes, that stuff is very important. What did you find out about French soil? Why is it important?
Well, the interesting thing about my film is that it doesn't go into these types of technical details, because it's pure verite, and because it's actually about the people and not the wine. You do see every step of the process from start to finish, from picking the grapes off the vine until the wine is in the barrel and then finally bottled. So you see it, but it's a visual story. And I chose to do it that way to sort of lure you in with your senses and with a community of people and this eccentric winemaker, which you see his relationship to the soil. You see his relationship to his vines and to the wine in the barrels as he smells it, and he's like knocking on the barrels and listening. And I found that palpable storytelling would hopefully inspire people to do their own research, because that information is out there. And I'm hoping that this can reach a wider audience of people than maybe a more technical documentary.
It's always interesting when you have a bad season or whatever, how it does affect the workers, because they're relying on this. This is that season. And it's a very short season, that sounds like, but it seems like
Yeah.
the long days and the strenuous days. Talk about what that's like.
Yeah, so this was actually the worst harvest of this winemaker's career.
Yeah.
And it was because of weather. The grapes had been behind in their development, and then it became very, very hot. And so they got scorched before they were ripe. So it was like unripe grapes that were already beginning to rot. Is sort of a layman's explanation for what went wrong for this harvest. And because of that, there were fewer grapes as well to be picked. And so the harvest was shorter. Like the actual duration of this harvest was shorter. And that absolutely affects the workers, because if it were 3 or 4 or 5 days longer, that's 3 or 4 or 5 days more pay that they walked away without.
Yeah. What was the lasting impression that was left on you, whether it was the family, whether it's the workers?
It was absolutely the workers. Not to say that a famous and very enigmatic and talented wine family is not interesting. They were, but I think it's the workers, because we don't see that side of the story. If you watch certain documentaries about wine, it's often the fancy people that drink the wine. And that's, there are a lot of people that put love and labor into making this beverage, that we never see their faces. And not only do we not see their faces, we don't know their story. And so being able to having the privilege to go to the workers' hometown and be welcomed into their homes, and seeing, the story behind the people that choose to do that labor, that choose to be devoted to a certain winemaker, what they do with the pay. What is this extra pay? How do they work it out with their yearly work? Because this is a finite period of time. So they have other jobs, they're cobbling together. It's a whole picture that I had never really seen, even being very, very active and involved in the wine world.
What was the deciding decision that finally made you say, okay, I'm going to do this? What was it? What was the one thing? Was it you participating in it? Or was it, like you said, was it the workers? Found them really fascinating.
I mean, I think there's something sort of intangible when you want to make a documentary film about a subject. And it's sort of this, it's not magic, but when I was there with the workers and the family in those dinners where the bottles of the house Solo champagne, so expensive, so sought after, is just set on the table for everyone to have, workers and wine family alike. And the feeling of drinking that, literally the fruits of their labor together as a community. I was able to really experience that, and I wanted to capture that in the film. But if I hadn't had that moment, having picked grapes all day, sitting side by side with the workers and drinking that champagne right out of an unmarked bottle, I wouldn't have known that I wanted to create that experience for the viewer.
Well, and I found that actually good. And I was like, I always root behind the scenes when it comes to things, because, I've done enough of these interviews throughout all the years that, it's difficult to do the documentary, but also to gain that trust to get the stories from them. and then to make that good film that what it is. It's one of these, you know, eclectic finds that you want people to come out and see this film in a different way. You know, I've been working with some of the studios in a way to say, okay, we got to show this a different way now, just like we have to do these interviews in a different way. But, you know, we've always kind of been doing it this way, you know, but it's done in a different way now. So even for the filmmaking and putting it out on different platforms, I've always saw this coming. I saw this coming as little as 2 years ago. So for me, it's nothing. My thing is, this is a really good film, and I didn't know who the director was, because the less I know about it, the more I'm intrigued to see it. Because if I have to watch 2 and 3 movies a day with all the other stuff that I'm doing, it's gotta be compelling. And the fact that, you know, we brought a property that's got rich soil and that we can have, and we can grow small wine on it, but also it's turned out to be, because of the climate change, that's amazing. So I was able to see a little bit of what you talked about, of what we may go through in Northern California, because a lot of vineyards are on fire. The grapes and
it's horrible.
so, and I was looking at it, what you discovered through this way, not knowing when you did it. And, you know, my hat goes off to you, because you captured something that's almost a lost art.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm so glad the film touched you in that way, and that you saw it that way, because I very much felt like I was capturing something that's disappearing.
Oh, absolutely. What was one of the last things that you were doing to put this together? When did you exactly finish this?
So I finished the film right before its premiere at Doc NYC last fall, 2019.
Okay, so you got it in just in time before February. Yes,
yeah.
That out. Good for you. So when
I know, I feel very grateful I had a live audience at the premiere.
Well, because you could see how things are going different way. We're one of the few in the entire country that are still shooting out of our studio, for one, where there's still people coming in. But at the same time, this is our 28th straight week of doing Zoom interviews. But, you know, we're 6.2 million views a day and counting. So we figured out how to do things differently. So you, as that independent filmmaker who does those documentaries, you are very, very important to us, because you've got to get that word out a different way. And when I'm talking to filmmakers and film festivals, the CEOs, they're like, you got to do it this way. I know what it's like to run a film festival, Hollywood Film Festival, and not have the best one domestically, but in name outside the US, have a great name. And to pick those films that people may see, that they don't come into the final frontiers of things, I know what it's like to do that. It's not an easy thing, because I always watch the full film. I never saw 10 minutes of nothing. That's always was doing a disservice to the filmmaker. And I would still tell these people that you can't just watch 10 minutes, you got to watch the whole film. You know, these people worked hard to finish this film. Give them that justice, at least, whether you like it or not. You may not like a film, but someone else will like it.
Well, I love that philosophy, because I do agree. It's a labor of love. And for many films, they don't, you know, end up reaching a large audience. I'm grateful that mine have, but I think it's an honor that you're giving every filmmaker to watch their entire movie.
Well, I come from the home video world. It was one of those things where, like I said, if you're watching your end credits are good. And because I'm not giving anything away, I love what you did at the end of that.
Thank you.
It worked. You did it for a certain reason, not to give anything away, but talk about why you did that.
You mean the bottling?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I wanted you to be able to meditate upon that final, like that's the only time you see the final product.
Exactly.
And so to meditate upon that in a way, you know, that is actually what brought this whole film to be, and all of the people together, is this product. And so that's the only time I allow us to sort of meditate upon that component of the story while we're watching the credits. And also, you know, I think my DP did an incredible job. Shout out to Ryan DeFranco. He shot a beautiful film, but also that bottling footage was just, you know, beautiful in a very formal way as well.
Talk about what it was like to show this to the live audience, and talk about what it's like now not to be able to still show it during a live audience?
Yeah, so we were, we had a great premiere at Doc NYC in New York. We had a really great turnout in a large theater. So we were able to see it in a crowded room of people on a huge screen. And, Brian Bender and Denise Culon, who did the score, did an incredible job. And you can really only appreciate a score in a theater with, that theatrical sound. So, it was incredible. I had so much of the crew there. I'm based in New York, so a lot of family and friends were there. I'm so grateful for that experience, because soon after that, the world did change and it's had to screen virtually at festivals. And I don't get the experience to watch other people's faces as they watch the film and know, if the joke hit and hear everybody's laughter. And that's something I definitely miss about, a virtual film festival circuit versus actually traveling and meeting people as they watch your film.
Well, and the reason why I ask, because this is how, going back to 2015, going back to the early 90s, when I was recommending films at video stores. We don't have video stores anymore, do we? Yeah. No. How old you are, but remember, I was one of those. There was a kid. I always joke with Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith came out of Clerks. That's how Clerks came about. Quentin Tarantino, when he was working in a video store, he would always give you something that he thought was great, and you might not like it. I always pick films based on people's taste and that mood of that day, where you needed to be uplifted. Well, I'm going to give you a good comedy. If you wanted something suspenseful, I was going to give you that. When it comes to this is something I want to show with, with Sideways. Because they go together. Yours is completely different, but these are recommendations when I've said, hey, give me a good film when it comes about wine. Well, here's one. You get the families, you get this other family that comes in and actually works on the farm. And that's intriguing at the same time, because there's not a lot of those. But the few that have been out there, they're pretty good, but there's just not enough of them. So my hat goes off to you deciding to do that. There's not a lot of them out there.
Thank you. And I've gotten a lot of feedback recently about how surprisingly this film is hitting in a particularly poignant way due to the way the world has shifted. Because what we've lost is community. What we've lost is that, picking grapes side by side, or, there's a lot of what you see in the film is close contact, touch, kisses, handshakes. Being together, the importance of being in the same room. And so for those of us who aren't able to experience that as much as we would like right now, this film might touch us in a different way than it would have before.
Where is this being shown now, and what's next for you?
So the film has been released on Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video. So it's accessible on those platforms for anyone in the UK, Canada, the US, Israel, Australia, New Zealand. But it hasn't had its European premiere yet. So that is what's next, because this is a French film. And there's a French audience that we are going to bring this to. And so that's the, next down the pipeline.
Oh, good for you. That'll be exciting, huh?
Yeah, I hope that, one day I'll be able to fly again to France. I think we're still banned.
We are.
To share it with an audience.
Who would have ever thought we'd be banned from our,
I know. Yeah. So we're waiting on that a little bit to when I can do some promotion around it on the ground in France. And fingers crossed, that's, not 5 years from now and more like 1 year from now.
Exactly. What do you hope the audience gets out of seeing this film?
I think a number of things. One is an understanding of the laborers behind a luxury product like champagne. A little more about the wine process itself, but also this is a film about craft, not just the craft of winemaking or the craft of labor. It's about the craft of filmmaking. It's a very particular type of documentary. It's, it's pure verite. And so I hope that viewers grow to appreciate that form of filmmaking as well, because it's something that I've been so drawn to. It's a challenge to make. And I feel like it's a particular immersive experience that we don't often get to have when watching a documentary.
Laura, give your social media links, how people can reach out to you.
Okay, so the film is Wine Crush Film on Facebook. And then I'm L Naylor 111 on Instagram.
What are you working on next?
So, doing a film
Something
production right now is
interesting,
tricky. No, I have some ideas actually for France, and another wine film, but I was working on a child during the post-production of this film. And so I now have a 2-year-old who is taking up a lot of my pandemic time.
Yeah, very interesting. Like I said, when I was watching this, I'm like, well, she finished it in time. Good for her. That's what I was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because life changed for me in many ways.
Exactly. Give your name one more time for the audience, the name of your film, and where it can be seen again.
Hi, I'm Laura Naylor. Thank you for listening. The name of the film is Wine Crush, and it can be seen on Amazon and iTunes.
All right, Laura, I want to appreciate your time and what you've done with this. I'm always reaching out to my friends, and usually I have 13 co-hosts, all women, and they love to drink wine. They were not available today because I would have had 2 of the girls on with me. So
cool.
I might have to have you come back because I want to share this with them, because when we can get together, I follow their lead. I let them pick the wine. Do you like this? What do you think of this? Because they're more attuned to it than I am. So I follow their lead. So I'm going to make them watch your movie.
Make them watch my movie, and we can all have a toast with maybe some of the house champagne.
Okay, I will definitely do that. I'm the one that's always got to pick the films. I'm like, you need to see this. Okay. And then they go, can we do an interview? I'm like, I already did it with her. I'll do a follow-up. Like if I get you, commit. And then they do, because one's in Tennessee, one's in Georgia, 2 are in Miami, one's in British Columbia. And she's, one of my number 1 hosts, one's Greek. And I'm working with the Greek Film Festival right now because theirs is going on virtually for another 4 days. And then 3 are in Los Angeles. So, and then 1 in Chicago. So you can imagine we've all got together continuously throughout the week doing our show.
Yeah.
Imagine what that's like. But I couldn't get them at 9 o'clock in my time. But I can make it up to you, Laura. So I'm going to show this to them. All right.
Well, congrats. It sounds like you have a lot going on. That's amazing.
I do. That's why I said I got to do it at 9 my time, because, I never want to do a disservice to a filmmaker. It's hard for them right now. You have less outlets to show things on. Good for you that you got it on Amazon. I don't know how you did that, but I'm glad you did. And that makes sense, because when I'm in the studio and we're talking about films with my fellow film critics, when we get together, and I'm wanting to do a show once a month with them, we're all not seeing the same thing, which is not good. So I want to make sure that when we do talk about stuff, I got the longest list of stuff, because stuff that they're not getting a chance to see, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
well, thank you so much for, finding the film and enjoying it, and for reaching out.
Well, I like Kelly. She's always had some great films throughout the years. So you know what, never just count anything. And like I said, the least I know about it, the more I want to see it. I want to see everything. Yeah, and if it comes to in front of me, I'm a movie whore. I have to see it.
Yeah. Well, I bet you have an incredible knowledge of film history by now.
I consider myself one of the best in the world. I mean, we finished 17th in the top 50 of radio podcast television shows. So when you beat Oprah and you beat Jimmy Fallon and all these people, I'm like, really? And I didn't even submit a show. That tells me a great deal. Now, if I submitted something, we would have been in the top 10. But I didn't know anything about this. And this is for New York and Los Angeles. I had no idea about this. So
yeah.
So I'm the only movie reviewer in there. So what does that tell you? That's not good. So, our fellow film critics, our junketeers, when we used to get in person and talk to everybody, we can't do that. And we don't know when we can do that. This is the best way of doing it from now. So we have to do our best to make sure we help promote people like your films,
Well, thank you. It's been an honor to chat with you.
Thank you so much. And, I have a feeling I'm going to do a follow-up, especially when I have the girls watch it. All right.
All right.
Out to you, okay?
To be continued.
Exactly. I've had part 2s and part 3s with the girls, because all like drinking wine. So they're going to love seeing this.
All right.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bye.